Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor on his extended sabbatical during episode 563. I'm Keith.
I'm Shaun.
I'm Glenn.
How goes it? Welcome back, Shaun.
We were on one of those, weren't we? We had an extended sabbatical once.
It felt like an extended sabbatical.
Yours probably did.
How was recording without me? I have not listened to it yet.
So quiet.
Oh,
Yep.
Well, it's because you weren't here, bringing the energy and the joy and the fun to the podcast.
I imagine it went very smoothly.
Sorry,
and there
Keith,
were no
that probably that probably hurt a bit.
That's okay.
It
It's
went
late
very
at night and I'm
smoothly.
tired. I get up early. What do you want? I work an 8 to 5 and have young kids.
Shaun, what did you do on your week off?
I went to Disney. Yay! I won't bore you all with the details. But for those of you that like to be bored with other people's vacations, I'll put out a side trip detailing all the fun that we had. I will just say that we did have a lot of fun. Shy is a roller coaster fiend, which we did not know how that was going to go, because she'd never really... and the very first one she rode was the Aerosmith Rock and Roller Coaster.
Oh, gosh. I was going to say, well, at least you went to Disney where you kind of you can kind of softly go into roller coasters, but you actually went to the big one first.
No, we went to the big one first, not intentionally, it just worked out that way. And I had not ridden this. It wasn't there the last time I was in the park. So it's this very aggressive indoor dark ride, upside down, forwards, backwards, rockets you through it's an intense coaster.
Yes, it
and
is.
She's screaming next to me through the entire ride.
And you're like, I've traumatized my granddaughter.
Yeah. I totally thought, man, this is it. This is the end of this. We're not going to
ride any more rides while we're here. Period.
Mel and I will be doing the kid swap thing. This is it. And we pulled into the station and her hair is all plastered back. She looks like that Memorex meme with the guy in the poster. And she looks at me and goes, again. I'm like, oh, okay. Unfortunately, that set the tone then for every subsequent ride.
I'm sure.
Is this fast?
Yeah.
Well, it's is this a coaster? Well, it's a ride, honey. We're in line for Winnie the Pooh. Is this fast? I don't think so.
Oh.
But yes, we had a very, very good time, and I will bore you with more stories of that nature when I get the other one. What's the word I'm looking for? Side trip. When I get the side trip done.
By the way, Patreon members and subscribers, if you want, Shaun shared a story with us before we started recording this podcast that was quite humorous, and we're going to put that up on Patreon. So that's an exclusive. If you want to hear that, you have to be a member. So get those pocketbooks out.
It's behind the paywall for good reason.
Yeah,
I would just say that. So.
Which it's also will be separate from the side trip.
Right.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
exactly.
I will pitch it in the side trip and tell you. Now, if you want to know the end of this story, go over here.
Well, did you guys get anything watched, or was Disney pretty much all consuming? Anything new? Anything new watched?
No, we are still episode, I think, 3 on Ahsoka, which our TV night is tomorrow night, so we get another one in, but we'll be behind, obviously.
By a lot.
Yeah.
Unless you guys just do a marathon.
Nah, probably not, knowing.
3 episodes tomorrow. Go.
Yeah, believe me, I want to. I am not the holdup.
I think maybe once you've seen 3, or you're on episode 2.
We've seen 3. They.
So I think after episode 4, you might be able to convince all of them to keep going, because it just ramps up from there.
No, I'm loving it. Such a good show.
Yeah, it really is.
We watched A Million Miles Away, which is I believe it's Amazon. It's the one with based on the true story of the Hispanic migrant farm worker who goes to become an astronaut. starring
Oh,
Michael
with
Pena.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Michael Pena. Yeah.
Very good movie. Really enjoyed that one. It's
Oh.
it's exactly what you would expect going into it. It's a heartfelt, warm, feel good movie. But enough about me. What did you guys do?
Keith, what'd you do?
I read a book.
What'd you
I
read?
read Star Wars Rise of the Inquisitor, something of the Red Blade. Hold on.
It's a long title.
It is a very long title. That's why I can't remember it. It's basically the story of a Jedi who winds up joining the Inquisitorius. And she
I
was
wouldn't have got that
actually-
from the title.
I know, right?
Yeah, no, it's
surprising.
What a surprise. Are you sure you didn't spoil something with that?
It was actually as a character that was introduced in a comic as just a one-off, one of the Inquisitorius, and the author was able to dive in and do a full novel on it, and it is really good.
Oh.
It's Star Wars Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. That's what it is. By Delia S. Dawson. It just came out, and it's one of the better Star Wars books I've read outside of the High Republic lately. Very good, very good. And then I watched Amazon Plus's Interview with the Vampire.
I have heard nothing but good things about that. Continue to add to the pile, please.
It is very good. I can't. It's been a very long time since I've read the book. They have taken some very large liberties with their storytelling, predominantly updating the time period. So instead of being whatever it is, France, they set it just before 1900 in New Orleans. So Louis is a Cajun, a native New Orleans guy who is part French, part black. And kind of still the pimp that he is.
I think he's
in
probably
the books.
all French, all black.
Well, that's true. Well, I don't know. They don't dive into really his. They refer to him as a Cajun.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I don't. Yeah. So I don't. It's played by.
French is a nationality, not a race.
Well, that's true.
Okay, just making sure we're on the same page.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's played by Jacob Anderson, is Louis,
yeah.
who is Grey Worm and Cinder, and he does a phenomenal job.
Well, I'll check it out.
I will add it to my pile.
Anything else?
Nope.
I didn't really do anything other than catch up on Ahsoka, and then we did watch the latest Only Murders in the Building, which was really, really good. In fact, I don't know if you guys are watching that, but there's a song that I downloaded just to put on my Halloween playlist. it's not your typical spooky song, but I felt like it worked. So
Nice.
it's a really good song. Steve Martin sings it, so it's a lot of fun.
Is it King Tut?
No. I think it's called Which of the Pickwick triplets did it, I think is what it's called. The premise is the musical they're doing is there's been a murder in a lighthouse, and the 3 infant babies are the suspects. So in this play that's being performed, so I can't go on any more than that because it gets so outlandish. But Steve Martin is the inspector in the play. His character Charles is playing the inspector in the play. And he does this song, and it's a patter song, so it's kind of like Modern Major General, where you do the. Anyway, so he's been struggling with it all season, and in fact, he's so afraid of doing it that when he starts to do it, he goes into what they call the White Room, and it's just like this hallucination where actors go when they've lost the plot, and it's like this weird. Some are there for days and they don't realize it. Anyway, people see them and they're like whacked out on drugs, but in their mind they're in this euphoric place because they've gone there to escape this anxiety-inducing thing, and this song happens to be his anxiety-inducing thing. But for this particular episode, he actually gets through it, so we get the whole song.
Oh, that's
Anyway, there's a lot more to this show than that. That's just a little piece of it. I mean, the show is something completely different than what I'm making it out to be. But this piece of it has been a lot of fun, and that song's really, really good.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
This is Tim Trelaw.
This is David J. Howe.
I'm Peter Purvis.
I am Sadie Miller.
This is Lauren Cornelius.
Larry, it's Fraser.
For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world and beyond, the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. I'm Larry Van Mersbergen, your host, and I've been collecting for 42 years. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex on the Direction Point Podcast Network.
We are going on a journey, a very long journey, through the world of the Target novelizations in publication order. Every week, we are looking at a new book, talking about Terrence Dicks, Malcolm Hulke, and all our Doctor Who novelization friends. Whatever you do, keep turning the pages. This is Jason Miller of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast, a member of the Direction Point Podcast Network, and you are listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
The other thing that I did is going to be this week's Something New 2-Minute Review. I reviewed The Beast of Scar Hill, which is a audio from BBC Audio. All right, this is read by Mina Anwar, who we all know played Ronnie's mom, Chandra, on the... Mina, on the Sarah Jane Adventures. And she does a phenomenal job. Obviously, it's really hard for every person that reads a book to nail the parts. But I think she does a really good job of making all of the different voices in this distinctive enough. I don't think the Doctor seems as commanding. It's the 9th Doctor, and he's very commanding in this first season, and I don't think it comes across well enough as the way she reads it. But that's okay. It doesn't take you out of the story at all. But it takes place in the Scar Hill Hotel, and there's a really bad storm going on, and the patrons of the hotel and the staff are pretty much stranded inside. They can't go anywhere. Legend tells of this beast that roams Scar Hill. The 9th Doctor and Rose show up, and it becomes a sort of base under siege story. It does have kind of this really neat atmospheric feel. I don't think it gets as intense as it could, but it's a pretty decent story. The things that I think it has going against it is the Doctor and Rose don't show up until about 15 minutes into this. And this is one of these hour-long stories. So they're only in about, 3/4 of this thing. So there's a lot of character development, which I think suits the story well because you have a lot of players in this story. However, I think it does go a little too long setting the atmosphere and setting the scene. And then I think the other thing that I had, and this goes to the verge of maybe being a little spoilery, but when it's finally resolved, it's almost like the Doctor and Rose just were kind of there as players, and the Doctor really doesn't, in a Doctor-like way, solve this thing. It finalizes based on another character, and that was a little problematic because the Doctor's going through all the motions of figuring things out, only to have everything kind of finalized without him being kind of our hero, which I suppose if you've got so much Doctor Who material out there, maybe you don't have to have the Doctor be the hero every time, but it sort of sets it up that way, and it kind of subverts that at the end, and I think that was a little bit of a disappointment. It's almost like the Doctor didn't need to be there. It's an enjoyable story, and if you've got, a couple hours to kill, I highly recommend it. And that's my Something New 2-Minute Review.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
And my name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our Doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram. Putting the wrong Doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Traveling the Vortex.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, And every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Allison Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
Well, let's move on to news. The big news this week.
A trailer.
Yay! Shaun, did you get a chance to see it?
I did get a chance.
Oh, good,
to see
because you were in a stupor all weekend, so I was afraid that.
Well, I understand why if you get
We're really pushing Patreon, aren't we? No, what'd you guys think?
Oh, I am so excited for these specials.
I am equal parts jazzed and excited and thrilled and bring it on, and I'm ready, and a little apprehensive.
What has you apprehensive about it?
Well, without knowing, obviously, because it's a trailer, it feels very Series 4. We've got David Tennant back, we've got Donna back, and their dynamic, which is such a highlight for me watching that series. And it feels like we didn't miss a beat getting back into it. Which, okay, cool. That's a very big.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the detriment. But okay, go ahead.
Well, in a way, it is because it also feels like a retread. It feels like and again, I don't know because we haven't got to it yet. But the mystery of why David Tennant is returning as the 14th Doctor. Why revisit this face? Just because you can, or is there something deeper to it, or and then to give us a familiar companion and to kind of go through the paces again. That's not new. That's a rehash of stuff that we got before. And for the 60th in particular, it seems a little. Well, I mean, not that it has to be a ginormous multi-doctor extravaganza, but it seems like we should get something new and fresh to celebrate the anniversary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can.
So I'm sure my worries are baseless.
Yeah, I can see
but they're there.
I can see those concerns. I personally don't have that. In fact, every moment that I see this, it's very exciting for me. I kind of like the nostalgia of it. I like the fact that we're not only celebrating 60 years of the series, but we are celebrating New Who. And I think David Tennant was a big part of the success of New Who. And I think it's familiar territory.
So.
It's familiar territory for Russell T. Davis. You said it feels very season 4. Well, yeah, because it's David Tennant, Donna Noble, or David Tennant, Catherine Tate, and Russell T. Davis. I mean, they've come back to do the same characters that they left with. But I also think it kind of is a way. I've never felt like Donna's story was closed well, and it always felt like it was left in a someday we'll revisit this. And so to me, this is that someday. And so I'm kind of glad for that. I'd like to see what that is. And I think that you can take and kind of wrap that up, bring the excitement that I think Doctor Who, I mean, let's be honest, the last couple of Doctors have not been as energetic as we had with Eccleston, well, not even Eccleston, but David Tennant and Matt Smith. And so I think this is kind of a soft, I don't want to say a raw, soft reboot, but this is sort of this is kind of a cheat or a easy way to kind of bring that back for the celebratory year. So I can't fault him for doing that. I think that makes sense. I'm not disparaging Peter Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker in any way by saying
no, not at all.
But that's just that's the reality of it. I loved both of those Doctors. I loved a lot of stories in their seasons, but overall, when I'm looking at the energy of the show and fandom, it hasn't been there as like it had been. And so I think this is a way to kind of bring that back and maybe give Ncuti Gatwa some momentum as the 15th Doctor and get, out of the gate. And so I'm really excited about that. And I think that's what this trailer energize me with, because I think all the other trailers we've seen I think I was as excited about those, but this one is now the long trailer that we get to see a lot of things happening and get a better feel for what's going to happen. And finally, we are confirmed, although the trailer doesn't necessarily confirm it, but BBC confirmed it, that Neil Patrick Harris is, surprise, playing the Toymaker.
Well, what do you know?
I know.
Wait,
makes me wonder why they decided to announce it.
All that work that we've done with Toymaker Archives is going to pay off.
It is. We did something right this time, Shaun.
Oh my goodness! Right. Your first. I'm sorry, Keith. Go ahead.
I was going to say, going back to the tone and Shaun's concerns, I think as unfair as it is, a lot of that to keep it from feeling like a retread is going to fall on the writing and David Tennant's performance.
Yeah.
If he can play the Doctor as a slightly different version of the Doctor, making it a very different, or not even a very different, just a different enough incarnation from the 10th Doctor, it's not going to make it feel like a retread. And I'm really hopeful that they do that.
I don't see that, though. I don't see that happening I think he's going to play it very much like the 10th Doctor. Probably maybe a older, wiser 10th Doctor, but I think that
and that's what I want. I want them to not ignore, him slip back in the old shoes and ignore the history of what's happened to this character over the last several incarnations. Yeah. He needs to still have some of that weight, I think, moving forward.
Right.
To go back to your point, Glenn, about Donna Noble's story being unfinished and that this is that someday, I think that's another source of apprehension for me. Because Donna dodged a bullet,
and now the bullets are coming.
Yeah, it's lurking out there in the universe with her name on it, and it could be argued that she got a happy ending. I mean, she got married, she won the lottery, yay. But by that same token,
it's a happier ending than death.
She had finally, I don't want to say come into her own, but she kind of completed her journey to become an actual functioning adult in society thanks to her interactions with the Doctor. And she was exposed to such a larger world than just being a temp or just being a daughter. And so much of that character growth was wiped away. And how tragic that is. And yet it could be a lot worse. And so I'm very because I'm with you. I want to see what happens. I want to see the conclusion of her story, but I will be watching from behind the couch with my fingers over my eyes because I'm not sure I want to see what's going to happen.
Well, time will tell. We'll see. I mean, we've only got about a month. No, almost 2 months if you count to the 23rd, which I'm kind of thinking with no release date still confirmed, that I have a feeling that those specials are going to be a lot closer to the anniversary. So, and then of course the other thing I think that we got out of the trailer is the fact that Gemma Redgrave will reprise her role as Kate Lethbridge Stewart. I don't think we knew that yet. The only thing we had seen about Gemma Redgrave,
we knew she was coming up, but not with the 14th Doctor.
Right. We knew that they were talking unit spinoffs. So.
Well, and they announced her with the 15th Doctor.
Oh, she did. Oh, okay. I didn't remember that. Okay.
We knew she was coming. We just know she was coming this soon.
And we get a shot of Unit Tower.
And any odds on whether or not she destroys this one?
No, I really have a feeling that the reason why we destroyed the last one and got a brand new glossy clean one is for the Unit series. So
it would make sense.
Something
we think this one might stick around.
Yeah, we think so. Something we missed last week when Keith and I recorded was they did announce that Miriam Margolyes will join Doctor Who playing Beep the Meep. So, and for those of you that don't know who that is, she played Madam Sprout in the Harry Potter Madam Hooch. No,
Sprout.
Sprout.
Yeah, Madam Sprout.
You're right.
Yeah, Madam Sprout. Hooch was the brooms teacher.
Yes,
Quidditch.
The Quidditch teacher.
And then, she played Madam Sprout. So she's also a very, very funny comedian. She's very adult humor comedian. If you ever listened or watched any of her material, but keep the kids out of the room. Well, moving on. Recently, there was some concerns that Russell T. Davies was going to gloss over the whole timeless child, and he has responded to that. Keith, you want to take that?
Yeah, in the most recent Doctor Who magazine, they had a quote from him while watching the final version of the Star Beast. He ironically responded that the 13th Doctor's TARDIS remained intact despite all the alleged erasure going on. He said, quote, "Oh my God, the TARDIS, the Jodie exterior, she has not been erased. And yet by erasing her, are we erasing the argument that she's been erased? This is an act of an erasure. Is it?"
He was being a little coy with it, but I think he is acknowledging that while there has not been a lot said, that there's still evidence that the 13th Doctor exists, that the story exists, and that he's not necessarily yet glossing over the timeless child.
It seems odd that there are claims of it when there's no evidence to support that he is doing it.
Right. I thought the same thing.
I'm sure it's wishful thinking on certain people's parts, but it's interesting that you notice how diplomatic he was.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we're not erasing Jodie. Well, nobody ever said anything about erasing Jodie. the concern or the hope was that the timeless child elements of Jodie's story were going to be glossed over or ignored.
Coy. Yeah.
And as is Russell's nature, well, maybe.
Well, he also just kind of, I think, was poking fun at everyone fearing that he's doing erasure, because he then later goes on to say, in reference to the show moving back to London for the on-screen location of, "Oh my God, that's London. Too much London? I liked Sheffield. Sheffield snub. It's still very rude to the people of Sheffield. I will post about this and get reactions to the snub." So I think he's just having a laugh.
I think he is too.
Everyone.
We shall see.
Again, time will tell. Yeah, absolutely. We shall see. And then one other thing we had was, just real quick, the Doctor Who Worlds Apart. That's the online TCG game that is been worked on quite a bit recently. They are actually doing their open testing this weekend on October 29th. That's, you have to do it. It closes after that, but
September, you mean?
I'm sorry, September. Yes, September 29th at 11 a.m. BST. And after that time, you have to have a founder's token in order to have continued access to that. If you've already registered for the Foundation tournament, then you can get on the Discord server and coordinate battles with others. So that is there. Go check it out. Our next bit is something that we're adding now. We're going to talk about some upcoming conventions that are coming up. These are just quick mentions. The DevCon Sci-Fi Toy, Film, and Comic Fair is happening on October 1st in Plymouth in the UK. And the Doctor Who guest featured there will be Janet Fielding. And then, of course, in the U.S., Oktoberfest 2023 Collision is coming up at the in Plainsville, Indiana on October 21st. And the big Doctor Who guest for that one is Sophie Aldred. I would so love to get out there and see that one. That's only, a 9-hour drive from here? Gosh, if I had the time and the money, I would just go. Mm-hmm. That's so much fun.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson, Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
Let's move on to our review of the Third Doctor Adventures, The Annihilator.
Did you notice anything odd about that policeman?
No, why?
He seemed strangely blank.
From Big Finish Productions, The Third Doctor Adventures, The Annihilators.
There's no way out. We're trapped.
What happened with the TARDIS?
There was an odd surge of... well...
Of what?
gravity.
Gravity?
Oh my giddy aunt. What's that? I'm hallucinating. I must be.
They say that talking to yourself is the first sign of madness.
What? But
Still, let's hope you appreciate the gravity of the situation.
Doctor!
Jamie! It's so good to see you.
You too. Oh, we better, keep our voices down.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
There's something in the water at Luke Docks, something strange and green and deadly. Summoned to the north of England by a mystery informer, the Brigadier finds his investigation hampered at every turn by the local police. Just what are they trying to hide? While the Third Doctor uncovers sinister goings-on at the city morgue, Liz attracts the attention of something unearthly. But with time running out, quite literally, the Doctor and Liz and units aren't the only ones to find themselves targeted by a world-shattering alien menace, but because they've got a previous Doctor and his best friend Jamie in their sights too.
Dun dun dun.
Yep. I would give it a resounding dun 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 as well. Keith, you want to start this week?
Oh, sure. A resounding dun dun dun. They did such a good job capturing the season 7 era of the show, straight down to the 7-part story. I think the story itself is very well thought out and very well executed, even down to the point of we're going along. Okay, I don't trust either of these aliens, but I don't trust the people impersonating the police even more. And then, the second Doctor shows up and gets confused and thinks that the people who kidnapped him are the ones trying to destroy the Earth. And then I go right along with him. I don't even question myself. So I get confused and are taken aback when it's, oh, wait, no, they're not the bad guys. They're the good guys. And I think it's a very clever mechanism and very well executed. And the fact that I got swept along so much by the story that I totally got sucked in. And even though I initially thought, well, one of these guys is good and one of these guys is bad, that I got far enough in and got sucked in and confused enough that I couldn't tell which was which anymore, which I think is what they were intending.
Right.
The Brigadier was fantastic throughout this entire thing, as was Tim Treloar as the Third Doctor and Daisy Ashford as Liz. All the writing for the characterizations I thought was fantastic, and the performances were very well done. You totally bought that these were the original actors. Michael Troughton, when he shows up, I think is very well into the swing of being the second Doctor, because I heard just the second Doctor the entire time while doing it. And then the fact, how they were able to reconcile two being together and not causing complications, I thought was very, very clever as well.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I think it was a very good story. Sometimes it felt a little long, but that also fits into the time frame that they're setting the story.
Yeah. I do to address the how well they were able to place the second Doctor and Third Doctor together in this together. And I think that this interaction actually sets up the more contentious bantering of butting heads in the three Doctors, because that clearly happens after this. And I think when they're united in that, there's when it first comes about, it's almost like you can tell there's already some tension between the two, that they don't operate well together. They don't have the same ideas. And I think we're supposed to think that the third Doctor remembers this personality and either regrets it or is ready to put it behind him and or doesn't agree with his former, persona or his first personality or his former personality. But this one so much sets that up better because they come to this at loggerheads because of what's happening. And I think that the way that this is left, it almost forgives the third Doctor for already being in the state of mind and position that is in the three Doctors when the second Doctor shows up, now back up in this case. And so I think it makes that work a lot better, that we've had this confrontation or we've had this interaction between the two, and based on this, it kind of makes it more sellable that the third Doctor is the way he is to the second Doctor, and in turn the second Doctor back at the third Doctor. It makes that work a lot better for me.
Well, especially for the third Doctor perspective, because I never got the impression that the three Doctors was set during season 6B.
It wasn't.
So it would be an earlier version of the second Doctor.
Yeah, that's true.
Who in theory would remember the third Doctor, except for the fact that, when it's a multi-Doctor story, they don't remember what happens.
That is true.
Thanks to the retconning of the 50th anniversary.
I also think, though, that yeah, that's true. I also think that and it works for the fifth Doctor, or for the 25th anniversary as well. But I think that the only reason we don't place the three Doctors in season 6B is because there's nothing in the three Doctors that requires it to be season 6B. So that's the only reason. So it's not necessarily that it isn't happening at that time, but there is nothing that contradicts it happening so that it has to be placed in season 6B. So that could happen after the third Doctor, or during this era as well. We just don't place it there yet.
So it's interesting to think of it in that perspective of the third Doctor is history to the second Doctor and future to the third Doctor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is it's really an interesting way to kind of think about how they approach each other.
Absolutely.
And they kind of, in a way, portray it that way, in my opinion. And I think it's written almost that way, that the second Doctor kind of recognizes the third Doctor because of the three Doctors, but the third Doctor only recognizes the second Doctor because it's his history.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that probably is what makes it work well as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing...
And the fact of having Jamie as older, I think, is a nice touch, too.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I have to, in my head, although the cover of this one makes it easier to think this way, but I still, in my head, have to think, okay, it would have been how old he was when he was with the second Doctor in the two Doctors special, so with Colin Baker. So I still picture him that way, and I think the cover of this one does a better job than that second Doctor anthology, but box set did. But
see, I have to kind of disagree with you, at least on the back end of that statement, because I've never had an issue thinking of Jamie as the two Doctors Jamie. That to me is, that's Jamie. Like I can hear it as the age has crept into his voice, and okay, cool, we're there. But when I saw the cover of this, I was like, well, who's that guy supposed to be?
Who's the guy in the kilt?
Yeah, because it wasn't Jamie. Either version.
It looks a little like Brando, but I mean, if I'm not wrong, if you look at it really close, it kind of looks like Marlon Brando, a younger Marlon Brando.
Wait, when did we get to Unbearable Lightness of Being?
The other thing that I was going to address on this was it's the Helt, and I cannot remember the name of the other species that is your typical green blob gooey, which
the actual good guys.
When I've listened to this twice, because I had to listen to this about a month and a half ago to make sure that this fit where we were placing it in season 6B. But then I listened to it recently again, and I still can't remember their names. But I remember the first time listening to this, wondering if we were going the Rutan route with this. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't. But I had sort of went that route with the description of these, what we were getting. But the Helt is the other one. And I think what this also harkens back to is, although I think that the Helt, well, maybe even the Dravins are the same way. If you remember Galaxy 4, we are led to believe that the scary-looking monsters that the Rills are the bad guys, and the beautiful blonde-haired women are the good guys. And it, at that, it kind of flips it on its ear and turns it around, and we find out that the Rills are the good guys. And this is kind of that same concept where the green gluey blob guys are being described as creepy, scary invaders from space, and the Helt, because they've at least taken the I don't know that this is their actual form. I think they allude to the fact that they have a different form as well. I don't think they come out of that form after they've been revealed. But anyway, we have these, what we expect, human-like looking people. So naturally our inclination is, well, these are the good guys. So I think that it's not something that hasn't been done before, but I think it's done really well again in this story by circumventing those expectations.
It's not something that's done very often.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised it doesn't happen more. And as Nick Briggs kind of mentioned in the bonus features, that he wanted to do a reverse Class of Axos.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's another good example of circumventing the norm there.
Yeah, they think they're good because they look nice, and then later reveal that they are nasty and they don't look nice.
Yeah.
The only other alien species was Grestinor.
Grestinor, yeah.
Which is a really weird, awkward name, in my opinion.
Seconded.
Shaun, I didn't mean to step on you. I hadn't finished my thoughts there. Go ahead.
No, you're all right. I struggled with this a little bit because I felt like for the very clever use of not all that is ugly is bad. I kind of felt the story was a little pedantic. It was a little predictable. It was a little, okay, been there, done that. We've seen this before. But honestly, I didn't care because of all the things you guys mentioned with the casting and the chemistry and the vibe and the setting and the tone that made it a Third Doctor adventure. Up to and including the 7 parts. And there was a part of me that I looked at the runtime on this and went, sure, yeah, well, most of that's going to be, special features. And then got to part 4 and it didn't end. And I went, oh, are we going to go there? And I got kind of giddy excited because it's been a while since I have immersed myself in a Third Doctor story. And so as it played out, I was right there. It felt like the 70s. It felt like a Third Doctor, and every week. And there's a capture and an escape. And, a couple of the cliffhangers don't work. Like, whoa, wait, the Brigadier shot the Doctor? Say what? That's actually a bad example because that one kind of worked for me. I was like, well, how are you going to get out of this? But, it just, they had the tone of it so well done that I found myself kind of glossing over any issues with the story and the plot because it's like, I don't care. I'm having fun. And what a well done homage to this kind of whole era that they've got going on there. Although now that you said it, yeah, the Routons would have totally made this story so much better.
It almost they almost do an improvement on the story because unlike a lot of the Third Doctors, to me it didn't feel like as much of capture and escape to pad it out. It just felt more luxurious and spending time building the mystery more than trying to get to the action and have a capture and escapes. But maybe that's
notice,
more me.
Even in the method with which it was done, it was very. We get some suspense, we get some science stuff, we get a lab, we get unit, we get call-in reinforcements, we get all of those boxes are ticked. You know what I mean? All of the tropes are there. for a third Doctor story. And then once you finally get to like the last 2 episodes, then all of a sudden the action scenes kick in. And it is action by Havoc. The Brigadier's throwing grenades down hallways. And, the machine gun fire nonstop. Yeah. I mean, it was right there. So even with the kind of expanded and embellished story beats, it so perfectly mirrored all of those things that you would expect from this era.
Yeah.
So for me, I've never made it a secret that I don't like the Third Doctor marathon era. I don't like the 7-part stories. I mean, the stories themselves are good, but I've always said they need to be shorter. They don't need to drag them out for 7. And I know the reasons why they did that back in the 70s. There was an absolute good reason for that because of the budget constraints and everything else. But I've never been a fan of the 7-part stories. I've never been a fan of the 6-part stories in that era. And I agree with you 100% that all of this, it's the nostalgia of this that makes this work as a 7-part story. But there's more to it than that, I think. In this story, there's a lot of characters, and there's a lot of character development, and there's a lot going on. Because not only do we have the Third Doctor and Liz and the Brigadier, we also have the Second Doctor and Jamie that are introduced like 3 episodes in. We don't even get them in the first couple of episodes. I mean, we get the little, gravitron thing that you hear the Gravitar, yeah. But then we've got the all of those characters that are the inspectors in disguise, and then you've got Al, and you've got his girlfriend, and you've got the Reals. They're always going away to different things and keeping you interested, and you don't get bored because we're seeing all of these different parts of the story as they're constructing this mystery. And so it's paced really well. So you never feel like it's trotting. You never feel like it's like, okay, just get to the next thing. And you don't even notice that there hasn't been a lot of action until you get to the action and you realize, oh, well, this is where the action finally happens. And so that's what makes this a good 7-part story, because it does it does things right with plotting that story out so that it doesn't feel like it's dragging, and it doesn't feel like they're just putting filler in there to get 7 episodes out of it.
Right.
And it's one of those yet another example of Big Finish being able to meld the modern storytelling with the trappings of a classic story. All of those things where it doesn't feel like it's drawn out, and even some modern ideas into the story are there, but it feels like it could belong in that era.
Something they get right half the time with the Second Doctor adventures, because I think we've commented on how the first story in each of those sets never feel like a Second Doctor story, but the second and third always feel, or have so far felt like Second Doctor stories. So at least they get it right.
Well, and the fact that they don't even try to do multiple stories in this box set. It's
right.
just one
this
big
is
story.
just one big story. Yeah.
And I think that was something else that was refreshing. Because as you said, Glenn, I'm right there with you. When we were doing our Friday Night Who's and having to break up these 6 and 7 and 8-part stories into multiple weeks just because there was so much there. I was never really a big fan of it. But I think because of that, because I wasn't a fan of that and I stayed away from it, that coming back to it and seeing what they were going to do and hitting that nostalgia button kind of was like, yeah, this is very kind of cool. I mean, I, again, don't know that I'd want it all the time, but it was fun to return to.
Well, and I don't know about you guys. I didn't sit down and listen to this in one go. It was spread out over a week. kind of how these stories were intended to be viewed was spread out. So the fact that in an audio format, you're not, at least I'm not sitting down listening to the whole thing at once. So it also works to have that longer story, that longer format in an audio version.
My first go around with it, I did space it out. My second go around with it, I listened to it in less than 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah. Of course, I knew it was coming, so it didn't even seem as long the second time I listened to it. So
yeah. Well, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I was doing knock out some audio if I'm mowing.
I was doing a lot of yard work at the time. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that second time round, too, I don't have to listen to it as intently and as closely because I already know the story. I'd already heard it once. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else we want to talk about on this one? All right, well, let's find out what we got coming up on the schedule.
Delight these people were. Just an absolute delight that these people were. Coming up on the schedule, we return to the 60th anniversary tie-in tales with Once and Future, the Martian Invasion of Planetoid 50. What a fantastic title that is. And then
Shaun, you haven't started that, right?
I have not started it yet. No.
Oh, you were in
for a treat.
Oh. Wet my whistle with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Liberation of the Daleks, parts 9 through 12, the continuing story of the ongoing 14th Doctor in comic strip form. And we will follow that with some more 60th anniversary tie-ins with an honest-to-goodness book review. It's been a while since we've done one of those, it feels like. Timeless Adventures, the unofficial story of how Doctor Who conquered television. I can't wait to find out. And then we return to Doomsday with The Dying Hours, which is a Big Finish audio, which will be hours 20 through 23. And then some sort of social media for hour 24 to finish it off and put the nail in the coffin or deliver her from death's door.
I presume that's the wrap-up story that James Goss will write for the last hour of this, and they're doing that. They're going to post that on Doctor Who. It says on the website, on the Doctor Who digital channels, but the first story, I think they said that too, and they posted it on the website. So I'm assuming will end up on the website as well.
It's a digital channel.
It is a digital channel.
And we will find out at that time whether or not James Goss is enamored enough of his own creation to save her from the hangman's noose, or if he's going to let her go. Stay tuned, true believers.
Close my notes. Hang on. All right, of course, you can find us at travelingthevortex.com. If you get any value out of this podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that becoming a patron of the podcast. Click on that Patreon link, and when you become a patron of the podcast, you unlock more audios and specials by us. Right now, forthcoming will be a very interesting story of Shaun's trip. If we haven't whet your appetite for that enough yet, or teased that enough yet, be sure to check that one out. If you give just $1 a month, just $1 a month helps us out tremendously. If we could get 10 people to give $10 a month, that would be even better. It does help us keep the server on. We did just recently renew our server space, and it's been very close and tight, and we may not make it next year because, as you know, costs are going up. So if you want us to be able to stick around for another year, help us out. Also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to this podcast. It does bump us up in the ratings and recommendations. And of course, check us out on all forms of social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, or it was rather X, I guess. I'm never going to get used to calling it X. And anything else we need to touch on before we close this one? I will say, if you get a chance, check out our other fellow podcasters on the Direction Point network. We don't talk about this enough. We are part of the Direction Point Doctor Who Podcast Network. There are other great podcasts on there. The Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, Doctor Who Target Book Club Podcast, Police in a Junkyard Podcast, Time Streams is on there. The Doctor Who Literature Podcast is a new one that's just joined, a few months back. Time Ram, Doctor Who Gives a Blank, I can't say that word, on our family-friendly show. And the Doctor's Beard, the Doctor's Beard Podcast, and then the Wibbly Wobbly Timey Wimey Podcast. And I hope I didn't leave any of our friends out, but be sure and check those guys out. We do have a link on our website. to those shows as well. And as always, make sure you check out our sister podcast, the Five-ish Fangirls, which I think we were sort of responsible for getting that one off the ground, so we'll take credit for that. But yeah, check them out. They do not just Doctor Who, but they do all areas of fandom. So if there's something you like, they probably are going to touch on it. So be sure and check those guys out over there. We also have a link to that on our website as well. Now I think I'm done. Are we done?
That was a lot.
If that's going to do it for this time, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Shaun.
And I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.